You're listening to an AINC original podcast. We believe you don't have to do life without a compass. Let us be your guide on this amazing journey. Welcome to Navigating Life with Vision Loss.
Hello, you are listening to Navigating Life with Vision Loss, brought to you by the Audio Information Network of Colorado. I'm your host, Kim Wardlow, the Executive Director at AINC. We are starting a new month, July, and this month we are looking at health and wellness. And so we'll be diving into that. Before we do, I want to remind you that our Bringing Print to Life fundraising hike is August 12th, and we'll be staying close to home this time. We'll be hiking a trail just outside of Chautauqua here in Boulder, and meeting here at our studios for breakfast beforehand. So you can sign up on our website, aincolorado.org, and go to click on the link for hike, and you can register right there. We're excited to have lots of folks this year joining us for our third hike. So as I said, we're diving into health and wellness, and we're going to look at various aspects. So physical, mental, spiritual wellness. And today we are going to be joined by Erik within Live Energy. He has over 30 years experience as a health integration therapist and athletic coach. And he works with individuals based on their needs, but using a variety of modalities to create a program for them for overall mind, body, and spiritual health and wellness. So Erik, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me, Kim.
So, Erik, I always like to start the show just asking the guests if there's something, a fun fact or something you want to share about yourself that's just of interest to folks so people can get to know you a little bit.
Well, Kim, I don't know if it's such a fun fact. I hadn't really thought about this until I had spoken to Jonathan the other day. When I was in first grade, so we're quite young in first grade. That's the very first time that I actually had a vision test done. And they immediately called my mom into the elementary school to take me to the eye doctor because I could not see anything on there, that they were asking. And they thought I was just maybe faking it, but hey, better be safe than sorry. And basically the bottom line was my vision was so bad that I was labeled as legally blind. And so you can imagine the stories that I told myself for, I don't know whether we're 6 or however old we are in first grade. And I just thought I was dumb. I didn't know what people were seeing, but I didn't really think about it, right? Because my mom didn't read to me. I didn't read books. It just wasn't a part of my life until sitting in that classroom. And this was a few months in. I also had been swimming for about a year competitively. So I started swimming competitive at the age of 5. And one of the things that I realized was that when the coach was talking to us, I literally could not really hear what the coach was saying until I was literally looking at them. And they got to know over the years, they had to literally be in front of me and I wasn't reading lips, but for some reason, when I didn't see their lips moving with all the noise, the acoustics of a pool area, I couldn't understand. So, and every year, they'd only once a year check my eyes, and they kept getting worse and worse and worse. So that was something I didn't really think about until Jonathan talked to me the other day.
Oh, wow. Well, I had a similar experience when I was 5. I wasn't found to be legally blind, but I kept walking up to the blackboard. I didn't know you weren't really supposed to do that in kindergarten, but I kept walking up because I couldn't see the board. And so they realized that I needed glasses. So mine was correctable. But
they were able to correct mine, but they were so thick. And that creates all sorts of other distortions because I also had really bad astigmatism that the glasses was not very good at correcting. And I literally thought trees before I got glasses. Those little swirly pictures that little kids make of trees.
Yeah.
That's at best what a tree looked like. And when I first got glasses, I couldn't believe there's these branches. It was just a weird, awakening.
Oh, wow. Well, you've had some of the similar experience that many of our listeners have. I know they have various degrees of vision loss. So, Erik, to dive into our topic, you have been working in health and wellness for over 30 years. Today, we're going to focus on physical health and understanding our bodies. Why is physical health so important to how we're living our lives in general?
Yeah, and that's such an important part. It's a key question. So when we are not physical in our body, right? So moving our body actually affects respiration. And the lower our oxygen levels, the less energy we have, the less mental clarity and focus. And so we create these hormones in the body from movement that actually gives us joy, happiness, purpose, fulfillment. And so when we're not physically active, nothing in our body actually works better, and we deteriorate. We fall apart even quicker, right? We age faster. We don't have that quality of life or longevity.
So in your pre-show interview, you mentioned the idea of non-isolated moments and implementing a whole body approach to being able to heal specific pain points. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and why that's important?
Yeah, so it's kind of like this paradox. We've learned how to awaken, stimulate, develop growth in muscles. And we also have learned how we can go ahead and stretch them even more so. And what's happened, though, is that, like, we could take a bicep, for instance, that bends and straightens our elbow, and now we can do exercises that are strictly extending and flexing our elbow, and we can get on machines where we're stabilized and guided. But what happens is that actually creates an imbalance. So I like people to envision a bicycle chain, this complete loop. And if we focus on any one of those links, and that link gets stronger or larger or changes its size in relationship to the rest of the body, it creates a disharmony and a dysfunction. There's many key areas, but when we go to the gym where they have this equipment to isolate strengthening our legs, they are actually never strengthening the low back hip area through a full maximal contraction in the relationships to gravity that we move. And so I'm having to work with a lot of people with hip issues, low back pain, knee pain, because by isolating these particular joints and these movements, we're losing how our body is designed to connect all the way through these pathways. So the muscles work very different when we isolate them versus when we're using a full pathway of movement. Same thing with the shoulders. Almost nobody is getting their arms all the way directly over their head, right alongside of their head. And so they're working partial ranges of motion, and it creates, our body wisdom is to have pain to get our attention. Where is there an imbalance? So we want to learn, if we're strengthening our legs, we want them to work the way they do kind of when we're walking. The legs are actually going opposite directions. And so I've developed a methodology of movement that will strengthen every muscle from its full length to a full contraction while we're not stabilized or guided. It's beautiful. It's almost like a human body flowing in motion.
And so then as you're working with people, instead of just working as you might in a gym on different machines and focused on a certain area, then are you working in your session? Are you working through the whole body then, all the different muscles?
Yeah. So, and again, there's never a movement that the human body does or can do where we're isolating a particular muscle group. It's always this full pathway. So I have a lot of things that people are doing, and these movements can be done in a gym. You would just bring along a little different device. And so I will be connecting, say, from my right hand, it will be connecting in with resistance. That resistance will transfer all the way through that arm, through my torso, into the opposite leg. So it's working this cross crawl. When somebody sees the movements, it makes perfect sense. When they experience how, oh my goodness, I'm really feeling in this area or that area of my body, they're feeling in those areas that they never developed. And this actually brings this full pathway into, we no longer have a weak link, right? We're strong throughout that full pathway. The other thing on the legs is that we always have balance, and I call it kindergarten physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And so oftentimes people are working their legs symmetrically, and yet if you ask them to stand and balance on one leg, and I have all of my clients, whether they're vision impaired or they have perfect 20/20 vision, I have them standing on a leg with their eyes closed while doing these movements. And that connects us at a whole deeper level of real life function.
And then in your program, and it may vary by person, do you use weights? I know myself, I've looked at different programs, and some use weights and some advocate for not using weights, just using the weight of your limbs as you're moving.
Yeah, so there's all different beliefs on using weights or bands or machines. And the bottom line is that anything that offers a resistance, and that resistance is put through the body, there's going to be a positive gain with it. So I do have some dumbbells. I actually do have barbells. I have different tension cords, and they're not the type of tension cords that you find on Amazon or that you find in the physical therapy clinic. These are ones that I custom make for my clients. And so with the leg exercises, oftentimes I have a particular strap that literally can attach around the ball of the foot. And I'll oftentimes have an ankle weight for some of the exercises, but not all of the exercises. So there is kind of a combination of some extra mass of a weight, but it's got the recall memory of a cord. Because if you look at like somebody even just going for a walk, how many times their leg is going through a particular range of motion per minute, and the free weight machines or even the dumbbells and barbell exercises can't get anywhere close to that same number of repetitions in a window of time, where this combination of what I do with the cords, you can get the exact tempo, rhythms that the body is using in everyday function.
And how would you advise a person if someone came to you and they were just starting to get into physical fitness? Again, I realize that may vary depending on where they're starting from, what their condition is, but how do you advise someone to begin an exercise program?
One of the key is, to get a better answer, we got to ask better questions. And so everybody that comes to me, I go through a series of questions with them to find out where exactly are they beginning in their movement. What have they been doing or what haven't they been doing? And, in general, most people, they just don't walk enough. And so one of the very first things is finding out, well, what do you do when you wake up in the morning? And ideally inviting people to get up a little bit earlier, to go outside, go for a walk, right? Begin some type of movement. So making sure that somebody is moving at least 60 to 90 minutes, and that can seem really overwhelming for some people who check their Fitbits or their Apple Watches and they see they move like 15, 20 minutes a day. In that case, if that's all they've been moving is 15 or 20 minutes a day, if we go 16 minutes or 22 minutes, right, that's moving their movement meter in a positive direction, and we can eventually get them to 60 or 90 minutes. And then from there, once we just have them moving in general, we can easily begin to dissolve into their everyday movements these strengthening ones, or we can do a little bit more for the respiratory system. We can do things more for the active contractibility of the muscles, right? So I never teach people stretches, right? Because they violate the body in so many ways. Not 100%, but almost 100% of all the stretches that we have been taught in gym class or by the yogis do not honor the human body. And so probably beginning them on walking, and then with their walking, once they're kind of getting up to speed or getting to a certain amount of movement time, we start to work with the key areas of their body where they have tightness, and tightness is always indicating, or pain is always indicating there's a weakness. And then I'll begin to work with them on those different areas of the body. And
if a person is experiencing pain, how do you help a person? Some people hesitate to do physical exercise because they have, whether it's back pain or hip pain or something like that, to be able to do that without causing further pain or more injury.
Yeah. So, I've actually been coaching people since 1977, so quite a few years now.
Quite a few years.
And here's kind of paradox isn't the right word for it, but 100% of those people that I'm working with, no more painkillers, no more muscle relaxers, no non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. We stop consuming these things that disconnect us from connecting to our body. And then I work with the individual in a specific relationship to gravity. An example would be if somebody has low back pain, I begin them lying face down. Now, they might be on the floor, they might be on a sofa, they might be on their bed. However, they can be comfortable, relatively comfortable lying face down. Now, here's the next piece. The area of their body that they have the pain, I begin to invite them to work those muscles. So they'll start to, say, low back, they might start to lift their leg up a little bit. So they're relying on the hip muscles or the low back muscles to lift that leg up. And I have a signature movement that I call leg initiated roll, where that person lifting that leg up, that leg will actually begin to roll their body. They can eventually roll a full 360 degrees. So if they're on their stomach, they can go to their side and then eventually onto their back, onto the other side, and end up back face down. So I invite us, whatever muscle in the body is sore, to begin gently contracting it, because that will start to increase the nourishment, oxygenation, there's circulation. It awakens our body's intelligence. That part when we go to sleep at night, we're not the directors of what's going to get rebuilt or repaired. And so this methodology of movement awakens the body. And in the case of low back and hips, literally over 10,000 people have completely dissolved away their hip dysfunction, their low back pains. They've actually regenerated the whole musculoskeletal system by this movement called leg initiated roll.
Wow, that's so interesting. So I know often, at least through my lifetime and exercising, and even back in the day, back in school, you heard that phrase, no pain, no gain. And coaches would say, no pain, no gain. But I hear now that, and I'm happy to hear now that that's not necessarily true, that pushing ourselves until we're in pain is not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, so there's pain, right? There's this full spectrum, just like we have this full spectrum of emotions in our body. And just because something is a mild pain does not mean it's okay, right? It could be bad pain, even at mild. And something can seem to be fairly intense, and it's not necessarily a bad pain. And so helping each of us to have a better communication with our body, to understand the different sensations of what's really taking place. So the different cells, the different tissues, the different areas of the body will start to understand the language, this pain emotion with the body. So I'm asking people to connect into that pain, right? I'm maybe asking them to contract a muscle that's got that pain, to gently squeeze into it, versus trying to take like a painkiller or to deny it. But if something's really sharp or burning, we may need to do some other things. So pausing enough to really feel and begin to understand what's the wisdom of the body with that discomfort. The old school of no pain, no gain, that was kind of the athletic industry for breaking through barriers and trying to go to another level. And that's actually not healthy, right? Many of our best world-class athletes, they're fit, they're not healthy. There's a difference between that. And you can ideally have both.
Could you speak a little bit more to that, about how being healthy and being fit are two different things?
I just jump right into marathoners, and I've raced as a professional triathlete. I've done more than my share of marathons and ultra runs, literally where I could run for 24 hours. And so you get well over 100 miles when you do that. One of the things that I learned in my mid to later 20s was that when they put an echocardiograph on my heart, my valves were not opening and closing very cleanly. They were fluttering. And even though I was a top 10 ranked athlete at that time, my heart was not in great condition. And I'm in a beautiful circle of health professionals around the world. And one of the things they realize is that many people who have raced a marathon, right? It's easy to go out and run 26.2 miles. Well, all right, so I've designed to race those, but we are all intended. We could all literally, if we just put one foot in front of the other, within a short period of time, we're going to travel those 26 miles. But when we're racing it, we're doing that high heart rate. We are literally creating, we're killing some of those heart cells. And so even though that person crossed the finish line first or was best in their age group, it's not necessarily what our heart is really designed for. And I do my best to awaken the intelligence. And when we look at nature, nature gives us a lot of clues on a lot of things. Animals that are always going intense don't live very long. And the only time that an animal is going to these high intensities that we do in certain competition, it's because somebody's life is on the line, whether it's theirs or whatever they're trying to catch. And they don't do it for fun. They do it for an exact purpose. So I invite a lot of people to learn what is the spirit respiratory function of their heart, their lungs, and we spend most of the time there, and then we can train into the systems. And so one of the things I do with my program, it's kind of like taking a race vehicle. It's not out there on the course always constantly racing around. That's what most people are doing with their body when they're trying to get fitter, whether they're a competitive athlete or they're an everyday ordinary person that wants to exercise. I take people through and we make sure that all these systems are working. And it's not stressful on a tire to say, check its air pressure, the timing of the things. It's not stressful to check through those. And so the no pain, no gain goes away. We honor the body. We're strengthening it versus tearing it down and beating it up like many of our world-class athletes who have serious heart conditions.
Erik, I'm also curious, you spoke earlier about our conventional idea of stretching. And as you said, that's something that many of us with our exercise programs have been told, you stretch before, you stretch after. And you mentioned that you don't encourage that. Is there some other way then that you are relaxing muscles or achieving what we think we're achieving when we're stretching?
Yeah, Kim, you mentioned something kind of like it was embedded in there, relaxing. So if we were to be standing and a person keeps their knee straight and they lift their leg straight out in front of them, right? They lift their leg up. The muscles on the bottom side of the leg are actually relaxed. It's the muscles on the top side that we're lifting that leg up that are contracting. So it's the contractibility that determines the mobility, right, of the body. And when one side of the body has learned how to contract 100%, the other side of the body never needs to stretch any further. There will always be an elasticity of every tissue in the body. I use an example. A lot of people stretch their calf muscles, right? They're bending their ankles quite a ways. And if we were to ask that person, and there's a device that measures how many degrees a joint moves, if we ask the person to contract the muscles on the front of their leg, the front of their shin, and we measure how far that ankle goes, the number is generally about 20 degrees of motion. But now we ask that person to drop their heel off of a calf or to drive their knee forward to stretch that ankle. Many people are going 40 to 50 degrees of that joint that's actively designed for 20 degrees. So we're going 2.5 times further. the body can adapt to do every single one of the stretches that anybody has ever been taught to do. The body can adapt. But is that adaptation positive function or is it negative function? And I've been literally able to prove objectively that 9 out of 10 yoga postures have no place in a healthy body, and 9 out of 10 traditional athletic stretches have no place in a healthy body, because they're taking those joints beyond the active range of motion that the musculoskeletal system was designed to support it. So the key here is, if you have a tight muscle, ask somebody, how do I take this tight muscle? How do I fully contract it? What would that look like? And so my clients, they get to go through all 600 plus muscles in the body. We make it very simple. So there's these movements that integrates, half the body in one simple movement, so we don't have to be stuck in our head. And the other thing too is, if these, let's just say that a hamstring stretch, right, which is working a partial function of our hip, if that really is a legitimate exercise to be stretching, when am I going to have time to get the other 360 degrees of my hip joint, right? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Where literally in about 10, 15 seconds, less than that, I can have a person in a matter of seconds go through all 360 degrees of their hip function. But traditional stretching, where we're supposed to hold it, whether it's even as little as 10 or 20 seconds or 30 to 60 seconds, it just doesn't make any sense if we really stop and think about it. In my clinic, so 1988, there was actually a research study done. I don't remember how many thousands of athletes, many athletes, and they broke them into 3 groups. One group that did no stretching, one group that did stretching before their activities, another group that did stretching after their activities. And I do remember they did actually have a 4th group. They would stop in the middle of their training and do their stretches. All of them, there was more than 90% of those athletes' injuries, the ones that were injured, was directly related to their stretching, not to their training and their sport. And that goes back to 1988.
Wow, that's really interesting. I wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah, it does not honor the body. The intelligence of the body, when a muscle is tight, that's the body wisdom asking you to contract it. Somehow we got skewed in thinking, if something's tight, we should stretch it. And it doesn't work that way. And so also back in 1989, actually, I decided that every other client coming through the door, and I had a whole bunch of health professionals working with me in my clinic, we jokingly said, okay, this next person coming through, we're going to teach them to stretch that tight muscle, and then the next person behind them is going to be taught how to contract that muscle. And what we found was that in less than 3 weeks' time, and some of these people had these tight muscles for year after year after year, some were 10 and 20 years, where they were still doing that same stretching exercise. They still had tight muscles. But in less than 3 weeks' time, those people who learned to contract the muscles no longer had any more tightness and tension. They didn't have any more restrictions in any of their joints. But again, the ones that were taught to stretch that muscle weeks and months, and many people to this day, they're like, how long have you been doing that? Well, I've been doing it since I was in my teens, and they're in their 70s, right? It doesn't work. But I teach them the contractibility and teach them the mobility of, say, the leg-initiated roll movement, and it's beautiful how quick the body comes into harmony and peace. And it's like we start to love on our body, and it feels good to get up out of a chair or off the sofa or out of the car, and the body just moves without thinking twice about it. In wrestlers, one of the things they learned was that the stretches that these wrestlers were doing with their arms is that when their opponent was then putting force into that arm, and that arm was going to the end of its range of motion, the athlete's body's alarms did not go off. But the ones who knew what the active range of motion was, now as this outside force is starting to take that appendage closer and closer and closer to its end point of range of motion, the rest of the body began to move to protect it. And so in football, the same thing holds true. Not quite as bad as the wrestlers and the martial artists and that, but we don't want to override that intelligence in the body.
Yeah. I was fascinated by that because I've always been told, you're tight, you need to stretch.
And if we keep doing the same thing over and over and over and we have the same results, Centennial Peaks is ready to hire me to lock myself in. And so, when somebody stops and go, all right, I've had this tight muscle and I've been really good, coach. I've been stretching it. And I still have it tight after all these weeks and months and years and decades. And now all of a sudden you ask me to contract that muscle and it's like my muscle goes into spasms and cramping and other stuff. But then in a matter of a few days, it's kind of like, wow, I have an active range of motion I never had before. And you know what? I don't feel any tightness in that muscle when I get out of my car after driving for a while or sitting at the office or when I go for my runs or whatever it is you're doing with your physical body. They're like, it's not tight anymore. I go, aha, success leaves clues.
Well, and I would think there'd be a connection if your body is feeling better to your mental health as well, because I know you kind of work physical health, that the whole body, mind and spirit health. So the physical piece, I would think, would have an impact on the other two.
If anybody doubts that there's any relationship between our mental health and our emotional body, take two identical twins and have them next to each other. And one is in a slumped posture and one is in this erect, upright posture. Which of those two postures is appropriate? And here's the key question. If they're both straight A students, right? Why would the one look like they're all depressed and slumped over, right? Well, but what if they had just lost their most beloved pet? The family animal, right? And the one is still upright, right? Not even feeling the loss of that loved animal, where the other one is bent over and crying in tears. And when we understand that there are no bad emotions, emotions are just energy in motion. And when we think of emotions as energy in motion, when we begin to work with all 600 plus muscles in the body, and that's not to overwhelm people, I've made it very simple to naturally create this integration of all these muscles. Now when life takes place, we have the spectrum, we have the capacity to feel all these emotions flooding through us and not to have story stuck. Because when story is stuck, that's when somebody is habitually, say, in a depressed state or a sad state or whatever the emotional piece is that they're experiencing. So movement's really important for the emotional body and the mental health of the body.
Well, Erik, as we're drawing to a close here, what would you like our audience to take away from this episode?
Since this is really for an audience of visually impaired, right? No excuses. The human body, whether we have perfect vision or even something in between to the point of no vision, the human body requires movement for health, for quality of life, for being purposeful. And so just take time to really make note of how are you currently moving, right? What is it that you're currently doing? And let's expand upon that. And if you're only walking, what can we do to begin to integrate your upper body? And one of the things too, when I spoke with Jonathan, I've been teaching these world-class athletes, these triathletes who are runners and cyclists, to swim on a tether. And I realized that the visually impaired community would fall in love with swimming because we don't have to worry about where's that wall coming up. We don't have to even worry if we're swimming on our back, that the person is there gloriously getting healthy and fit and vibrant. And I literally swim on my tether. My eyes can be closed. There's nothing that I need to look at. And it's really beautiful. So the takeaway is everybody, each one of you, start moving, right? But know how much are you currently moving. Invite somebody into your life that can help you to grow and expand and move more dynamically. And for myself, I love to go dancing in a community at least once a week and, start to move your body more.
So I'm taking away that the key is movement, whether it's formal exercise, but also all these daily things we're doing, walking, dancing, all of our physical movement helps and counts towards that goal.
Yeah, so an emphasis here is find at least one other person, right? Find a community of people who are moving in a way that you are called to explore more, or to how you'd like to move. Get connected with community. Since COVID, right, too many people quit their fitness programs because, the facilities were all shut down. And the thing that I inspire them is get 2 or 3 or more friends. You meet together and do your movement together. And those people have so much more physical health and vitality. They also have better mental and emotional vitality in their life.
So, Erik, if somebody would like to contact you either for coaching or if they have questions, how would they do that?
Probably the best way is to go to my website, and it's nliveenergy.com. So that's spelled E as in elephant, N as in Nancy, live, Live, energy, energy.com. On there, you can click a link to have a free 15-minute consultation. And from there, we can go ahead and schedule your very first appointment.
Great. Thanks so much. I'm sure some folks will be wanting to contact you. Erik, thank you so much for the information that you've provided us today. And I'm happy to say you'll be joining us again for next week's episode. And we're going to focus more on nutrition next time. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. But thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Kim.
And thanks to all of you who have been listening as we're providing information to you. We hope that you find that helpful, and we welcome any comments that you may have. You can call us, send us messages through our website. So we always appreciate your feedback. So as I said, Erik will be joining us again next week, and we'll have more information for you that will help you to navigate your life with vision loss.